NBC News reports that Vice President Harris plans to deliver a closing argument speech on Tuesday. That's 1 week from Election Day at the Ellipse in Washington, D.C. This is the same place that Donald Trump spoke ahead of the January 6th Capitol riot. Harris plans to contrast herself with Trump by delivering a much different message from that very same venue. Here she is last night in Houston.
We know freedom is not to be given. It is not to be bestowed. It is ours by right, and we are prepared to fight for it. We must be loud. We must organize. We must mobilize. We must energize.
Joining us now is Democratic Senator LaFonza Butler of California. Senator Butler, can we just start where the vice president ended? You have known the vice president for a very long time. You used to be the head of SEIU in California. You were very involved in her first presidential race. Now you sit in the seat she herself once held, or one of the two Senate seats, to be clear. I just wonder what you think about what we are seeing in these last days and this closing argument that the vice president is going to make on Tuesday, literally in the same spot that one could argue Donald Trump incited the insurrection from.
Well, first of all, Simone, good morning, and good morning to the entire team of The Weekend. Look, what I know about the vice president and the lessons that she's learned being elected not once, not twice, but 3 times statewide across California is the power of coalition building. People think about California as just Los Angeles or just San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge. It is a state of 58 counties, 40 million people with all walks of life included. And in order to win statewide, you got to be able to put together the coalition. And I think the vice president last night was talking about the beautiful tapestry that is not only California, but this country, and how together we must join arms and wrap our arms around each other and fight for its future by choosing to do it together. And so I think that's a part of the joyful message that she is going to be bringing on next Tuesday, reminding this country how we have done hard things together before. And this is a moment, a turning point for us to reject the politics of hate and division over the last decade promulgated by Donald Trump, and to choose to do this incredibly difficult thing, that difficult thing being to pass on a more just America to the next generations, to fight for a new way forward, and we must choose to do it together. She's going to offer a vision of unity and a shared prosperity, and I think she's going to remind the American people what Donald Trump said just a few years ago in that very spot.
Senator, I think a big part of that closing argument is also a subtle confrontation. I'll put it that way, a subtle confrontation that she is forcing the country to have with itself. And I think it was really encapsulated in this question from NBC's Hallie Jackson when she sat down with an interview this past Tuesday.
Do you think the country is ready now for a woman and a woman of color to be president?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I am saying that in terms of every walk of life of our country. I think part of what is important in this election is really not only turning the page, but closing the page and the chapter on an era that suggests that Americans are divided.
When we think of the presidency, we think of a man. And you've heard Donald Trump even make that reference. Well, if, she becomes president, then how will she stand up to Putin and Xi Jinping and all these other men? I think she has made that case very well, that not only can she, but she has and will, as president, do that. How do you think that's resonating in this closing moment in the case that she's making to the American people, that y'all ready? Come on, let's get on board.
Look, I think despite all of the mudslinging and name calling that Donald Trump has offered throughout this campaign, what the vice president knows, and I think what we are seeing in early voting numbers all over this country, is that the American people know that there is a choice in front of them. And that choice is not man versus woman. That choice isn't black versus white. That choice is future versus going backwards. Are we going to move forward with a capable, competent leader that is going to choose to work to unite us and help to improve the status of our families and lift the status of our country? Or are we going to go backwards to the times of ridicule and division and hate? And I think the vice president is making a very strong commentary. You know, Michael, I have traveled these battleground states over the last few months, and I have talked to voters of all races, of different, actually, party backgrounds and history of voting, of all kinds of, spanning really the economic spectrum, where, you know, maybe I'm talking to somebody with $1 million in their bank account, or I'm talking to somebody with $200 in their bank account. And not once has a single voter across this country in those battleground states talked to me about the vice president being a black woman. What they talked to me about is, what is her plan to ensure that my kids can buy a house one day? What is the vice president's plan to invest in public education for our children? And sure, I believe that there surely is the obvious differences between Vice President Harris and Donald Trump. And I think the American people are going to choose a new way forward here and reject his division. And I think that point is going to be made strong on Tuesday.
Senator, I'm not going to make you listen to Donald Trump, but I will tell you that he is out on the stump just last night in Michigan, saying that he's going to protect women and families. What do you say to women who might buy that closing argument?
Melissa, thank you for the question. Look, I don't think that anybody believes Donald Trump at this point in terms of what he says about women or abortion or health care or tariffs or the economy. When you stumble into a grocery store for the first time probably in your life and still have to give somebody $100 to vote for you, I think that says a lot about what your credibility might be with everyday working people. The man has said that he's proud that he appointed the justices that ripped away the rights of women to make decisions about his own life, about their own lives. And then turns around and says women should be punished for choosing to have an abortion and make decisions for themselves and their families. And then he says he's going to be the greatest protector of women and families across the country when he's elected. Now, which Donald Trump is going to show up on what day? And I just don't believe that he is to be trusted. His vice presidential nominee is to be trusted. But women actually have the power, and our allies have the power to make the choice clear on November 5th and in these early voting stages. Let's not give him the ability to flip-flop one way or another. Let's make the decision ourselves and show him that we actually are going to be in control of our lives, and we're going to do it by making sure that Kamala Harris is the next president of the United States.